What's up, you guys? It's Kurt here. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about why you should not be buying airline stocks. Now, I know a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon of buying airlines because they've pretty much crashed. They're down 60 or 70% or higher. And also see a lot of YouTubers making videos about what are my top 3 airline picks or airline stocks that I'm buying right now. And I'm here to tell you that this may actually not be a good idea because you're exposing yourself to higher risk and a lot of uncertainty. I don't think you should be taking that risk, to be honest. I think it's a bad idea. And as a twist towards the end of the video, I want to also discuss another better option if you're seeking high return due to high risk. I want to give you a suggestion of what you could do if you want higher return than simply, for example, the S&P 500. Alright, so many people are trying to buy some airline stocks, Delta, Southwest, Air Canada, what have you, British Airways, but I don't see that as a good move. To me, this is a warning sign, and as you know, I don't like to follow the herd, and that's what also Warren Buffett advises. When people are greedy, be fearful, and when other people are fearful, that's the time to be greedy or stock up on stocks and businesses. And in this case, I don't see Warren Buffett stacking up on airlines. In fact, quite the opposite. He has sold some of his shares in Delta and Southwest. And to me, that's a warning sign. Maybe because he doesn't believe airlines will do well in the next 2 or 3 or 5 years, or maybe he just wants to limit his exposure to airlines. We don't really know the true reasons, but fact of the matter is he has sold a little bit of his airline exposure. And here's the main problems that I see investing in these airlines and individual stocks. First of all, it's never a good idea to buy individual stocks. I mean, we know that stock picking is very risky, and I don't believe the average investor should be exposed to this kind of risk. As we know, there's only about 4% of all the stocks that are actually contributing to the market gains. So what are the odds that you're going to pick the right airline? I mean, are you going to pick Southwest? Are you going to pick Air Canada? Are you going to pick British Airways? We don't know which airline will survive because many of those airlines will depend on the fact that they need to be bailed out. So which airlines are going to be bailed out, we don't know, and we don't know how they're going to recover. In other words, there is huge uncertainty, and when there's a huge uncertainty, it becomes too much of a risk that I personally want to take. And to me, it's a much better option to go into something safer. It's still good to stack up on stocks during the recession, but not take this higher risk of picking individual airline companies. Also, if you follow the news, there's a lot of layoffs planned for the airlines. Southwest has come out openly that 49 years they haven't fired a single person, or they've never had a major layoff. But now they're considering doing some layoffs because there is no other way around it. Another example across the pond, there is a smaller airliner in Europe, SAS Airlines. They're also planning to cut in half their staff. They're about to fire 5,000 people, and they're a 10,000 people company. So that's quite a drastic move, and they talk openly about it on Forbes that this is the only way to keep the company together in the next couple of years. What's even more alarming is that those CEOs of those airline companies, they share that probably it's not going to be until 2022 when airlines will be able to fully recover and probably get their travel volume back to that, high volume, high capacity where they're actually profitable. And speaking of profitability, I'm not sure how much you know about airlines, but I've had the opportunity to work for airliners, and I can tell you that they're very low margin businesses. So for them, 2 or 3% on top of their costs is a lot. So that's the kind of margins they're working with. So post the recession, after government bailouts, and maybe some of them are becoming government owned, having that 2 or 3% margin, I think that's a very, very difficult challenge that they're going to be facing. Another aspect that I want to share is that from my personal experience, airlines are not the most technologically advanced companies. I mean, they're not the businesses such as Netflix and Lyft and Uber. They're not those digital businesses which are very adaptable to the digital environment, to using artificial intelligence, to using machine learning to power all of their processes. And in fact, they rely on quite old operation processes. They have a lot of regulations, they have a lot of policies. Safety is a huge thing for them. So it becomes really difficult for them to adapt to current day environments, to digital business, to using artificial intelligence. So that being said, I'm not sure if they're going to be the most profitable companies and the businesses that first make it out of the recession. So to sum it up, in my opinion, buying airline stocks is very risky because, betting on individual companies is never a good idea in general, but also betting on the airline sector, there's a lot of unknowns, and I have my big doubts about them making another recession sooner than later. Alright, so if you have to have some airline stocks, despite what I've said so far, the fact that it's risky and it's a bad idea, if you've set your heart that you need to buy some airline stocks, here's a suggestion for you. First and foremost, follow your IPS plan. Follow your investment plan for long-term investment. Stick to your asset allocation that you've decided between how much stocks you should own and how much bonds you should own. And then maybe take about 5% of your portfolio and put that aside for a little bit of trading. Think of it as if you're going to the casino. You know that you're probably going to lose that money, but you still like the thrill of it. So take 5% or up to 5% of your portfolio and use it to buy maybe some individual airline stocks or Tesla or whatever you think, whatever your gut feeling is that is going to be the company to buy during this market recession. This way, you're not risking the majority of your portfolio, and yet you don't have the fear of missing out. So the worst case scenario, you're going to lose 5% of your stock portfolio, which is not the end of the world. Because I really believe that trading individual stocks is not going to make you rich, but if you're a long-term investor and sticking to these big funds such as the S&P 500, the total US stock market, total international market, that's going to ultimately give you the biggest returns year after year. So if you stick to that plan and that asset allocation, then you're going to be fine. You're going to be just fine. So if you want to play with a little bit with the stock market and do some trading in this recession, be it, but do it maybe with up to 5% of your stock portfolio. Alright, so what if you want the higher return and you're like, Kurt, but I want to buy the airlines, I want to buy the Tesla, I want to buy individual stocks because I want exposure to higher risk so I can get higher return. And I'm here to tell you is that you don't need to take that risk. That's too much of a risk. You can still invest in broadly diversified index funds, and you can pick a asset class which has a higher risk exposure, but it's also going to promise you a higher return. For example, did you know that if you invest in small cap value, which is riskier than something like the S&P 500, for example, but it can return on average 3% higher a year than the S&P 500. Now let me pull the portfolio visualizer here. If we compare two portfolios, one which is comprised of the S&P 500, or let's take the total stock market here, and another portfolio which is comprised of 100% small cap value, what you'll see that from 1972 up until today, for those roughly 50 years, the return of the S&P 500 or the total US stock market index is about 10% a year on average. And if we contrast that with the small cap value portfolio 2 here, the small cap value portfolio returned on average 13% a year. Now that's a 3% difference between the S&P 500 and the small cap value. And you may say, but Kurt, this is just 3%, it's not that big of a deal. I'm looking for returns of 20, 30, 40% when I buy individual stocks. Well, let me tell you, if we look at the numbers, for example, if we invested in those two portfolios, $10,000, the S&P 500 portfolio for 50 years would have turned these $10,000 into roughly a little over $1 million, while the small cap value would have turned those $10,000 of initial investment, would have made those into $3.8 million. So those 3% difference of a rate of return are actually $2.8 million in the long run. So as you can see, 1 or 2 or 3% of higher return makes a huge difference when it comes to compound interest. So if you're ready to take higher risk, what I wanted to stress here is that you don't need to take as high risk as individual stocks. You can buy a riskier asset class such as the small cap value, and there's a lot of research done on this. Perhaps I should do a video about it, but if you invest in a riskier asset class such as the small cap value, you can expect higher return. You just need to be able to stomach the volatility of the small cap value. Most people can't resist holding a asset class which is very volatile. But if you're saying that you can take the risk of individual stocks, then I really believe you should be able to take the risk of investing in small cap value. And as we saw, this would give you about 13% of returns a year on average. So thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video and you appreciate the investing advice. If you haven't noticed, on this channel we focus on real investing advice rather than trading and speculation. So if you appreciate this kind of content, make sure you hit the like button, because that's the only way to let other people know that this information is valuable. And if you're new to the channel, if you just landed on my video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon, because this way I can let you know via YouTube every time I post new videos on investing and personal finance. So until next time, make sure you stay the course, keep investing, and don't take any unnecessary risks.